It's Communication Week in the Scripps College of Communication, and this is a School of Media Arts and Studies event that we're calling Mountain Stage, a conversation with Larry Groce and friends. As some of you may know, Mountain Stage is the longest running nationally broadcast live musical variety program on public radio. I'm George Korn, a faculty of the School of Media Arts and Studies. And to my right is Larry Groce, the co-creator and artistic director for Mountain Stage. To his right is Michael Lipton, lead guitar in the Mountain Stage Band, assistant recording engineer, and many of you probably know him as the creative force behind the Carpenter Ants, a group that is popular in Athens. And also does a great job documenting Mountain Stage history. Put out a book on the 20th anniversary. We're now in they're in the 31st year of Mountain Stage, but a book that if you can ever get your hands on it, I think it's out of print, but does a really great job of documenting the history of the program. Brian Blauser, photographer from Athens, who shoots regularly for Mountain Stage, did the photos, and it's a great piece of work that Mike put together. To my left, Francis Fisher, the recording engineer for Mountain Stage, the one who puts it all down on, used to be tape, what is it now? Discs?
Hard drive.
Hard drive, puts it down on the hard drive. Good, okay. I've had the pleasure of working with these guys on various projects for the last 10, 12 years or so, and have become friends, but more importantly, have had the fringe benefit of hanging out at Mountain Stage. And to me, perhaps the most striking thing about them is the fact that they're immensely talented, but there's absolutely no pretense. You know, the star on a particular show is no more important than the guys who are unloading the trucks. And that's kind of one of the things that drew me to them and really made me want to work with them. And that kind of leads me to the key point here. The reason I think that Mountain Stage has been on for 31 years, one of the reasons is it's not just a show, and you know, I don't want to sound too melodramatic here, but it really is a spirit. You know, and I think that comes through at the live performances and on the radio. And it's a feeling that's really shared by the performers when they're there at the show. It's not just about performing music, it's about the power of music to unite, to heal, and to touch souls. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been able to hang around for 31 years. It was created in 1983 by Andy Ridenour, who has since retired, and Francis and Larry. And for those of you who aren't totally familiar with it, it's a 2-hour weekly radio show, features performances from a wide range of artists from all musical genres, and they always perform before a live audience, usually in the Culture Center Theater in Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm gonna, for just a minute here, there's no way we can do justice to 31 years, but since you know it's a little dry to talk about music, I wanna kinda get our heads thinking about music. And this is just a minor dip into the Mountain Stage gene pool. Over the last 31 years, REM, Sarah McLachlan, Nickel Creek, Cassandra Wilson, Counting Crows, Fish, Robert Johnson, Martina McBride, Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys, Nora Jones, Crash Test Dummies, Bare Naked Ladies, Taj Mahal, John Pizzarelli, John Mayhall, Richard Thompson, Nancy Griffith, the Holmes Brothers, Odetta, Arlo Guthrie, Yonder Mountain String Band, John Hammond, Yorma, Ben Harper, Paula Cole, Galactic, Bruce Hornsby, Vince Gill, Coco Taylor, Derek Trucks Band, Chris Steele, Bell X1, Judy Collins, Buddy Guy, They Might Be Giants, Hubert Sumlin, Pine Top Perkins, Charles Brown, Little Big Town, Amos Lee, Joan Baez, Jacob Dylan, Regina Spektor, Kathy Mattea, Don Dixon, Elvis Costello, Wilco, Marty Stewart, Delbert McClinton, Ani DeFranco, Del McCory, Cracker, Pop Staples, Mavis Staples, Richie Havens, The Band, Travis Tritt, Fairfield 4, Gene Ritchie, Asleep at the Wheel, Doc Watson, Robert Cray, Lyle Lovett, Guy Clark, and that's just a little bit. And some of the superlatives. The Chicago Sun-Times says Mountain Stage has earned a reputation as radio's most exciting live music showcase. Marty Stewart called it the coolest radio show on planet Earth. There's no such thing as creative boundaries here, and I love that. Peter Buck from REM, definitely the best live performance show on radio today. Kevin Coyne, I've never been on a show. This is probably the statement that really captures it. I've never been on a show with such a liberal musical attitude and such a refreshing lack of dogma. And Spin Magazine, of course, sums it up by saying, this show proves that radio doesn't have to suck. So I want to start out here and ask Larry about that spirit. How do you react to that?
Thanks very much, George, and thanks for coming. You probably, some of you are assigned to come here. Thank goodness from somebody. We're glad to see there's an audience, and we do take seriously music and the idea of what music can do and what songs can do. And we also, as George said, from the beginning, we have tried to not to make a big division between who's well known and who is not well known. One of the reasons for that is because one time I had a hit song many years ago, long before you were all born, and so I got to go on a lot of radio shows and TV shows, and of those days, Johnny Carson Show, American Bandstand, the Midnight Special, whatever there was those days. It's similar to these days, and I noticed the way they treated me. And how the things that I liked, I wanted to treat our artists like that. And the things I didn't like, I didn't want to ever do to our artists. So from the beginning, we've given artistic freedom to every band that's on the show. We never tell anybody what to sing or what not to sing. Never. Never have. We tell you how long you have. You have 18 minutes. You have 22 minutes. You do whatever you want. If you want to sing one song that lasts 22 minutes, that's your business. You want to sing the song your dad sang you when you went to bed? That's fine with us. You want to sing your hit song? That's okay too. We're not a commercial radio station, so we can do that. We don't have the pressure to we must deliver the hits. And because of that, I think we've also created a spirit amongst our crew and our people, which is we're all a team, we're all in it together, and we all respect each other. And since we don't have to, we're on public radio, we're not on commercial radio, we can focus. I'm not saying this is the only thing we focus on, but we can focus on what music is really about, try to do things we think are high quality, that are long lasting, and we don't have to only focus on something that is famous and that will bring people into the room or will bring millions of people to the radio. We do think of that, obviously. We're not idiots. We're not going to put out stuff that nobody will want to hear. But that's not the first thing we have to think about. So therefore, I think you're right. We don't talk about the spirituality of the show, but we do have a slightly different purpose, because we're lucky we can do that. We have a luxury of not having to look at Arbitron every day. How was it last week? Did we that's luxurious. If you're in commercial radio, you don't have that luxury. But we do, so that's one of the reasons why we can focus on a different place than just whether someone will sell something. So that may not be exactly the answer, but that's the best I can do.
Not bad. Michael is a killer guitar player himself, and you get to sit on the stage with some of the best talent in the world. I mean, what's your take on that? What's different about Mountain Stage from other programs?
Well, being in the house band, I had never been in a house band before, and kind of by definition, you're there to make people's music better. We usually get our charts 3-4 days before the show, and we all learn them separately. Then we have, 15-20 minutes or so to go over the songs with the artist. And sometimes, if it's a singer-songwriter who doesn't usually play with the band, with a band, they've long forgotten what their CD sounds like, what their arrangement is, and so often there are glitches we have to kind of make adjustments for. But it's a great. I think it's the classic thing of just getting into your part and getting into the music, and it kind of almost supersedes whether you really like it or not. I mean, it becomes your little craft that you kind of strive to do. as far as other people coming in, I think everybody in the house band experiences this on almost a weekly basis. Like, there's unbelievable players, and maybe especially guitar players, because that's, I don't know, it's a different kind of thing. So there are unbelievable guitar players that come in every week, and can be very daunting. But it's also, it raises the bar and sets your sights really high. Whether you can achieve them or not, and I think as a player, it makes you try and find your own niche, and you're not going to equal these people coming in all the time. Sometimes maybe, sometimes not, but you just have to find your little territory, stake it out, and kind of develop that. And it's been over, I think, 27 years or something. It's been an incredible growing experience as a musician, if that's what you were asking.
Francis.
Well,
Okay. No, I want to go somewhere else with you. But go ahead. You answer that one.
well, I was just going to sort of augment what Larry said by saying that it was in the '60s. I worked for NBC in New York, and I remember sitting at a desk one day. I was a broadcast engineer. Opened up the paper. Lyndon Johnson was president, and there was an announcement that NPR had been formed, and the legislation had been passed enabling it, and it described NPR as a service that would do things that commercial broadcasters could no longer do, and theater and music and whatnot, and at that time, the Doublemint twins, were doing commercials, and program directors were playing, top 40 stuff, back to back. In some ways, commercial broadcasting hasn't changed a whole lot over these years, although, of course, the music has. But this was an opportunity to go back to another day, and when, I don't want to say that money wasn't important then, but certain standards were important, and that it could continue, with NPR. And so I called them up right away in Washington and asked for a job, and I think I've been offered maybe 3 NPR jobs, and every one I'd say, well, are you going to pay me enough money? I said, I don't know how much money this is that you're offering. I said, just tell me this, is it enough that I can live inside the Beltway? And they'd say, oh no. And so I'd say, well, maybe another time. But then my family, we moved to West Virginia, came back home again. I'm from West Virginia, and then I began working for West Virginia Public Radio, and tying together and building a string of transmitters and stuff like that around the state, and then came to know Larry. Larry was also the first musician in residence, I think, nationally, and moved to the Elkins area in Philippi, actually, but went to the schools and stuff, and in Elkins, Randolph County, and Barber, I don't know where else, but anyhow, we came to know each other, and we've been collaborating for a long time.
Well, let me go with that, because Andy Ridenauer, who we just retired a few years ago as producer, he had the germ of an idea there in Charleston, West Virginia, to do this show, and you're the first one he collaborated with, right?
Yeah, and he said, wanted to know if he thought we could do this, and I said absolutely. And I told him, I said, but you got to get Larry Groce. And then he agreed. And so we just the whole thing began.
So what
We
was
had-
your concept at the beginning?
Well, Francis, I came to West Virginia in 1972. I've been there now, 42 years, as for a National Endowment Program, artists in residence, and there were 3 of us in the United States. I met Francis that year, so I've known him for 42 years. And I was a singer and songwriter, did the stuff, and then in the 80s when I'd met Andy because he'd also been a commercial radio guy, and when I had the hit song, he interviewed me on a commercial station, and I met Francis way back. So when they called me about this, I said, this is interesting. It's a good idea. Once a month, I'll be able to come home, because I was traveling. Once a month, I'll be able to come home and do a thing in West Virginia. But I said that they wanted to do a show that was a variety show in West Virginia for West Virginia Public Radio. They knew that the West Virginia Public Radio was expanding from 2 towers, and it was going to be many towers. And Francis was in on that, building towers, so it would be a statewide network. But I said, that's great, but I don't want to do a statewide show. I'll come back and do this, but I want to do a national show. And I don't know what they thought. They thought you're full of crap or whatever, because we had no
not
money.
at all.
We had no money, we had no experience, and we had no equipment. But we had a goal. I mean, and you embraced that. You said, sure.
My
Because
background was network broadcasting.
Francis
so.
was national too. He had done NBC stuff nationwide, and I'd had a hit song, so I thought, okay, at least that's our goal from the beginning, is to do a nationwide show. And Andy said, whatever you want to do. So we started out knowing that we couldn't get national talent in the beginning, and we didn't get national talent, of course. But within 2.5 years, we were picked up by NPR. We had done 26 shows. It was pretty quicker than we thought it would be. And then they had an attitude too, which was, we'll pick you up your little show in West Virginia, and but you'll never be able to really do great stuff with this show because you can't do that there. And of course, I mean, I don't know where you guys are from. Maybe some of you from Ohio, from West Virginia, from whatever. I don't care where you're from. If you're from a little place, that's like, holding the red flag in front of the bull. We said, great, okay, we'll show you what we can do. So we did, and it's been going this long, which is longer than any other show that they have of this type, a live music show. And that's how it started. We knew we had no money, we had no experience. We had experience as individuals in different things. Francis had network experience, I had experience as a songwriter, and Andy had some experience of producing things, but not a show like this. So we learned as we went along, and we gained money. It was really 33 years ago today that we did a pilot for this show. And it took 2 years for public radio in West Virginia to get enough money for us to do 1 show a month for a year. So it was 81 that we did a show. Today, a pilot show. Nothing happened for 2 years. Then 83 in December, we did the first regular Mountain Stage show. It's been running continuously since then. 1 show in 83, 12 in 84, 16 in 85, and then in 86 we did 24 shows and went national. And since then, it's been an average of 26 shows a year. There were years we did more, but that was a killer. So now we do 26 shows a year, 26 new shows a year. And that's how it started, and we just took it on faith that we could do something. We had really no idea what it was going to develop, and believe me, none of us thought 31 years later we would still be doing this show.
Well, you did an interesting quote. In the beginning, we were told we couldn't produce a show like this in West Virginia. We've since found this is the only place we could have done it the way we wanted to.
That's right.
What's that mean?
Well, it means that if we tried it, we've done the show on the road. We've done the show in Mountain Stage. We've taken it here. I mean, you may have seen it here. We've done it. We do it in Morgantown at the West Virginia University 4 to 6 times a year. We do it on the road in West Virginia, here and there a lot. But we've also done the show in Boston and New York City a couple times, in Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia, and around the country. And what we find is a different atmosphere, as you well know, regardless of where you come from. Maybe you came from a big city. It's different there than it is in a small place like West Virginia. And if we'd have tried to do this show in New York, it would cost so much more. There would be so many more unions to deal with, so many more things to deal with. Plus, even if you could get the money and the venue and all that, the artists have a different attitude in a big city. When artists come to Charleston, West Virginia, what do you think, they thinking, wow, this is the big time? Of course not. They're thinking, this is West Virginia. They can be like they are at home almost. But if you go to New York, we do the shows in New York, much more difficult because the spotlight is on. This is New York. Maybe a critic in the audience, or maybe somebody writing for the New York Times. You better be on your game. What does that do? It makes everybody, get a little more uptight. The way we do the show, the way we want to do the show, it's got to be done in West Virginia. And the style, we don't have just West Virginia artists. It is a West Virginia show, though, because our idea is to do it in a West Virginia style in West Virginia so that everything is laid back. I mean, you guys have been to West Virginia. What do you think? It's like, relax. It's no big deal. Come on in. Have a good time.
So how do the artists react to that?
I think they do that. I tell you many stories of artists who have come in, with an attitude. First of all, they don't even know what to expect. They don't expect to find Francis. They don't expect, unless they've been there before. Then they know what it is. But they may expect, West Virginia, podunk, whatever. And instead, they find the right equipment. They see the equipment they're used to everywhere. They find people who know what they're doing, talk to them, And there's Eddie out there, there's people here that know music and what you look for. You come into a place, you take a look around. You've been with bands, you've been in studios, and you look around and go, okay, well, this looks like somewhere I can work with, And then you see how the people work. Hey, these people know what they're doing. And then the way we treat them, and the way I say, just like I said, what do you want me to do? I say, I don't care what you do. You do what you do. You do the music you do. You got 20 minutes. Do whatever you want to do. And they like that, and they like the freedom of it, and they just like the general laid-back atmosphere. And I think we get a different performance than you get another place. I really do. I mean, maybe I'm imagining that, but I think you get a little bit different. It's like any atmosphere. If you record somebody in a studio, it makes a difference what you set up, what atmosphere you set up in that studio. They play different. They react differently. And so we give them a thing where we try to give them everything they want as much as we can, and then and also not be nice. and then where they go, we try to put them in the best hotel in Charleston, which is a nice place. Give them good food and treat them like, we're glad you're here. Because you know why? We are glad they're here. That's why. We're really glad they're here. That's why we were here. Otherwise, they're not here to see me. Nobody comes listen to this show to hear me. They don't come to see me. They don't come to see Michael play the guitar. They like it when he does. He plays with somebody. But that's not why they're here. They're here for the artist. So we're really grateful that they're here. And I think they like that, and they like that treatment. And we've had many people. We had one time, does anybody here know who Gordon Lightfoot is? You ever heard of him? The singer and songwriter. And he's written a lot of songs. Even if you're too young to know, you probably heard some of his songs. He came to the show one time. This is a true story. He came to the show. He flies his own airplane. He's a pilot. So he goes when he goes and comes when he wants to. So he came to the show, and his guy, back in those days, I don't know if you remember this, Francis, but the lead acts on the show were on at the beginning, and then they were on again at the end. We changed our format now. We do 5 acts in a row. But in those days, we did usually 4 acts, and one would open the show, the most famous act. They would also close the show. So and then we have a finale at the end of the show. That's how we finish the show. So Gordon's road manager said, okay, Gordon keeps to himself. We said, fine. He doesn't need to come and hang out with us. We're not here to be his buddy. We just want him to play music. So he said, he probably won't play on the finale. I said, that's fine. You don't have to play on the finale if you don't want to. So halfway through, he came out with this, white shirt, black pants, and his band. They did a great job. And then halfway through the show, he came back to me, and Gordon did, and personally said, hey, this is great. And he had a Hawaiian shirt. He said, I think I'd like to sing on the last song. And I said, great. You want to sing a verse? He goes, no, I'll just sing on the chorus. Great. So it was some folk song we had chosen. I didn't even know what it was. He came out, his last set, dressed differently, sang the last song with us. And then his guy said, after the show, Gordon does not sign autographs. He doesn't go out front. That's just not his thing. We said, that's okay. It's his business. We never make a demand for anybody about any of that stuff. That's their choice. So after the show, Andy was looking with Gordon's guy and his road manager. He said, where's Gordon? He said, well, he may be downstairs. And we couldn't find him. So where is he? So they went up on stage, and Gordon was standing in front of the stage, and there was a line of people. He was like right here. A line of people that went out the door. They had Gordon Lightfoot albums and stuff, and they were giving it, and he was signing it. And the guy said, I've never seen him do this before, ever.
That's the kind of spirit.
That's what I mean. I said,
right,
because
right.
There in West Virginia, where we are, people are not looking to get something from these artists. It's not like, I want a piece of you. It's more like, thank you. What they said was thank you. That's it. And then they moved on. And that, believe me, that people feel this. It's not something that's intangible. It's something they feel. And that's why I think we get some different kind of performances sometimes.
And you know, you're talking about people coming in and seeing the setup and knowing it's professional.
Absolutely.
Back at the beginning, you strung together 3 8-channel mixers, and
Yeah. It wasn't professional.
how'd that
But-
evolve?
Not at the beginning.
Well, that's what we had. We could come up with 3 8-channel mixers, and couldn't come up with you know, the 50 or 60,000 to buy a proper console for me. And the front of house console was the same thing. It was even less. It was like an 8-channel mixer, and so. But I mean, I knew how to tie those boards together, and I did that, and summed the outputs of them, and made our recording from that. Sent a sub mix to the front of house guy, and that's what he had to work with. But
Well, how many audio people we have here? Okay. This is not an easy thing. I mean, I've watched you do this. I mean, you have 5 acts come in the day of the performance. You have one board. You do what, about an hour sound check with each, and then you do the live show straight through. I mean, how? What's the process of organizing that? I mean, how do you keep that
I don't know
straight?
if I want to think about it too much, because I'm not a very organized person. So I'm about as ADD as they come. So I mean, they have a job to do, and so I guess my first step is to get them to do, you know, their hardest hitting stuff, and so I can set the gain on the board and, you know, that kind of a thing, and figure out what I've got. And then when once that basic thing is done, if anybody else is sitting there with me, usually Michael, you know, I'll turn around and say, okay, I'm ready to listen. And that's kind of it. It just starts falling together. I started building the sound. It's a radio mix. People have to be able to hear what's being said. So
what's your philosophy? How do you approach a mix? How do you approach your setup?
It's it begins just with that. If there's a lead singer, that person's words have to be heard, understood, and then begin adding the other instruments that are there. If it's a guitar, want that guitar to sound like it's 25 feet wide. It's the orchestra. But if there are multiple players, then we just started introducing them one after another until there's some sort of a balance that's pleasant to the ear. I have no idea how.
It just happens.
No, I have no idea how you would actually train someone. Say, here's some text. This is what you do. I mean, I think it's just something that you just have to sit down and do with real people and real sounds, and think of music, you know, that you've heard and enjoy and stuff like that, and see if you can't duplicate.
Well, there's 2 aspects of it. There's a technical side, and then there's a music side. You start with the technical side, setting the board up so everything is kind of consistent, and then so when we have to make moves, the moves are relatively minor, and everything is in the same kind of ballpark. But that's when the production mix side comes into play. And sometimes we've been surprised at very kind of well-known acts that come in without a sound person at all and completely leave it up to us. And then, you know, and then there's a lot of groups that have a sound tech that that they would be the house sound person for the band and come in and they have an idea, sometimes a very firm idea of how they want it to sound, and it becomes it's
Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not.
right, and sometimes it's working together, sometimes it's negotiating.
And for those of you there's 5 acts on each show. It's a live show. For the first 12 years, the show was live on radio. There's no remix. If you're engineers, you're mixing directly a band to be broadcast from multi-tracks to a stereo mix immediately. Francis does that right now. No remix. And and the band he doesn't know before until that day. You got 1 hour sound check. He's got to do just what the band has to do. The band has to play live on the radio. They got to get it right the first time. So does he. That's the way it was for the first 12 years. It's almost that way now. For the next time, we did recordings, but we really couldn't remix for the next 14 years. The last 4 years, we have a way to multi-track the show, so we can remix a little bit if we want to, but we don't do that very much. So basically, he's doing the show live from multi-track to stereo mix right now. And that's something that not many people do. It's a broadcast mix. People don't do that much anymore. They record in a studio, then they spend time remixing it to get the right mix. But what he does is a kind of a hybrid thing that many people, it's intimidating to many engineers. Some come in, it's similar to what people do in the back of the auditorium, mixing for live sound, but it's much more complicated because it's going on radio. And live sound, don't forget, you have the advantage of watching the people on the stage, which gives you, it's a different feel. If you're watching somebody perform and listening to them at the same time, it's different than just hearing radio, where all you have is the sound. And that's a thing for artistic direction too. Some people say, "Oh, why haven't you have so and so band on the show?" I saw them at Nelsonville, at 1 a.m, and oh, they were great. Well, yeah, they were great. You'd had 12 beers, and they sound great. They look great. They're jumping around. They're beautiful. You're with your friends. It's big time. Put them on then. Record those people. Put them on Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and listen to them and see what they sound like. It's a different world, and it's a whole different deal. So sometimes it worked great. Sometimes it doesn't work so great. I'm listening for another reason. I'm not there, in the field with a spleef in my hand. I'm listening quietly to something and I'm trying to figure out, is this going to work or not? I'm trying. Can they sing or not? Does a harmony singer sing, without me being drunk? Not so great.
Well,
it's fun to be there, but it ain't so fun to listen later. That's a different thing on radio.
Right. And that was kind of my point with Francis. He's being too modest here. I mean, I'm a video guy, so I don't know, but I watch the folks in our studio here, and I hang out in sessions sometimes, and you get to redo, and you've got 5 acts back to back. And you got an hour block with each of them, and it's pretty amazing to watch that happen. But talking about artistic direction, all right? First national exposure on Mountain Stage for lots of acts. Ani DeFranco, Ryan Adams, Kathy Mattea, Sheryl Crow, Mary Chapin Carpenter, Lyle Lovett, Counting Crows, Tori Amos, Alison Krauss, Sarah McLachlan, and a bunch more got their first national exposure on Mountain Stage. How does that happen? I know we were just talking tonight that you get these days 8,000 CDs a year.
No, we get about 2,000 people want to be on the show every year. We got 120 spots to put on the show, and we get them. They send us. Some people still send hard CDs. Many people send links to their site, and we get solicited from publicists, managers, record companies, individual artists, sometimes agents, and that's usually it. And they want to get on the show because it's a stepping stone to get better known. And if you're an emerging artist, it's really important to get anywhere you can get. And we're one of those places. We're not the Letterman show, but we are. Many people that do the Letterman show also do Mountain Stage, believe it or not. We get a lot of them the next week, the week before, whatever, because they're trying to do everything they can to get their name out. They got a record. They want people to know what it is. And we have about that many now. And there's some artists that we pursue, obviously. We want them. And then there are many artists that pursue us. And that changed. That started changing in '91 after REM went on the show. And we got thrust into a bigger spotlight than we did before. after they were on the show, a lot of people then said, "Oh, what the hell is this? Who is this? Why are they going to West Virginia?" I don't know if y'all probably heard of REM. Some of you may. You're old enough to listen to some of the music, whatever. But when they had Out of Time in 1991, REM had the record called Out of Time. Peter Buck had been on Mountain Stage with Kevin Kinney about a year before. He liked the show. He said it when he was going off. He's the guitarist for REM, Peter Buck. He said, "I'm going to bring my band back." I said, "Yeah, sure you will." I mean, I didn't say that to him, but what? Like, sure, love to have your band. So then Andy called me while he said, "Do you want REM on the show?" I said, "No. Tell them to send me a tape." No, I said, "Of course I want them on the show. Whenever they can get on the show." So they set up the date. We set the show. They released the album called Out of Time. It's the one that had Losing My Religion as a big song. They did no tour, no American tour. I think they may have done some dates in Europe. No American tour at all. Warner Brothers was going crazy. They thought this is idiotic. It ended up selling a lot of records, but they didn't think it was going to work. They did 3 shows. They did Saturday Night Live, at that time MTV Unplugged, and Mountain Stage. That was it. And so they came on the show. So what do we have? We had people from all over the friggin' world coming to Charleston, reporters from France and London, to cover REM, our little show. And the Today Show was there. All these people were there. We were like, yeah, come on, back off. But it was a great door opener for us because they wanted to do the show. Why? Because I think what you said at the beginning, they felt like this was a show that cared about music and that had a spirit that they wanted to identify with. And for 2 or 3 years after that, Michael Stipe sent me stuff personally. "Why don't you consider these people for the show?" One of them was Vic Chestnut, who I did consider because he was friggin' great. But, that was nice. And it was nice. And we still are in touch with Burtis Downs, who's their manager. He's a good guy. And he was raised in West Virginia, which didn't hurt. But that's the kind of thing where nowadays we're looking for things that we think are good, that we think appeal to NPR audiences, that we think will bring people in the door, and that we think would also appeal to West Virginians, because that's our very first obligation. We get money from West Virginia's state government. So I feel an obligation to do, that's why do you think I say live performance radio from the mountain state of West Virginia on every broadcast? Because West Virginia gives us a lot of money, one reason, and we love it there. It's a good thing. But that's getting people artistic direction. We've been able to, because we have such a wide variety of things on the show. I think that's another reason we stayed alive, is because we can shift the focus. If right now things are playing a little bit more in the Americana and country world, we can shift a little bit that way. If it becomes more like bluesy, we can shift that way. And week to week, we do different things. There's no way, probably, unless you listen to the show every week, you don't know what's on the show. You may have heard the show once. Maybe some of you people never heard it at all. You never know what's on. We were here. When was that? 3 weeks ago? Was anybody here? When we were here? So we had a group called Pink Martini, and we had the Parkington Sisters, who were a quartet of sisters from New England, and we had a guy from Milwaukee, Paul Seabar, and we had 2 jazz guitar players, Frank Vignola and Vinnie Ragnolo. And Pink Martini brought with them the original Von Trapp grandchildren. If you saw Sound of Music, it was actually the real people, their grandchildren, three sisters and a brother that sing. And Pink Martini sings songs from all over the world. They sing in different languages. They sing Japanese songs and French songs. As a matter of fact, they've sold more records in France than they have in America. They've had like 5 gold records in France. Interesting band, a big band, like 8 pieces. Then last week, who was on the show? Robert Cray, Blind Boys of Alabama, Dumpster Funk, and John Hammond. Who's going to be on in 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now? Keb Mo, Joan Osborne, Dirty Dozen Brass Band, and Tommy Malone of the Subdudes. And then in between that, we got a kind of Americana show with Amy Ray of the Indigo Girls. She has a new group of Americana music. Della Mae, who's an all-girl bluegrass band. Callahan and West, 2 people that sing old-timey sounding music, but it's original. And an Irish band, the Teetotalers, John Doyle, Martin Hayes. So we do a lot of different kinds of stuff. And that keeps us, that also helps us stay alive, because if we like we're only one kind of music, then we would have to then take some artists who aren't as good, but they're that genre. You know what I'm saying? If you have a bluegrass show, you got to take bluegrass all the time. Well, you can't always get Del McCoury, so then you take the second string and the third string and the fourth string, because you got to do bluegrass. But if you do all kind of music, you can look for the first string all the time, as much as you can get. So that's kind of what we
So
do.
let me follow up on that. I mean, obviously, it's pretty eclectic, the list I read earlier, and the folks you're talking about. How do you go about structuring a show? How do you approach that?
We find an artist that we call like an anchor artist, and usually it's an artist that comes to us. We're offered, like right now, let's let me think of what's recent. I'll give you a real example coming up. We were offered Patty Griffin on the 1st of June in Charleston. We were offered Toad the Wet Sprocket the same day, so I said, good, we'll put them on together. So we know pretty much we'll sell some tickets, because there's 2 acts that will draw people. And then Patty had this guy that's going with her that we're going to put on for the 3rd act, because he's with her and he's good too. And what is his name? Can't think of it right now. But and then we're going to have another act that we can't announce. Why can't we announce it? Because it's also playing at the Nelsonville Festival, and the guy there said, you can't put him on the show because it's a 150-mile radius, and that will take away from our thing. We said, okay, we'll put him on the show, but we're not going to announce him. So therefore, we're not taking away anything, because nobody knows they're going to be here. So you mean tell you who they are? I can't do that. Have to come to the show and see. But anyway, that's we usually get offered an artist. We say, good, we want that artist. We got Rodney Crowell in May. We got Patty Griffin, and then we got. We usually find an anchor. Autumn Defense is coming in, and the guy from Wilco, it's in a duo thing. Autumn Defense, they'll be in June. We got St. Paul and the Broken Bones will be during festival in June. We usually find an act, 1 or 2 acts to anchor, and then we look to fill in the other acts, and then we have a little bit more freedom to look for things that we know won't draw much, but we think are good. And that's how we've gotten some of these acts here, like you mentioned, because we can put on those people, because I hear them, I think, wow, this woman can really sing good. It was Sarah McLachlan. She's a really good singer. Nobody ever heard of her. But turned out she was. People did like her. So that's how we fill in those. They're not going to draw anybody because we have them on before they're heard of, but constantly getting presented with them.
One thing that I've picked up on, again, just being, I'm on stage groupie and being able to observe some of this, is the interaction of the acts themselves. I mean, they seem to appreciate being on shows with other talent, and what kind of collaborations have come out of that? Because I mean, I know the Van Trapps were talking to the Parkingtons about doing something together after that. I mean, does that happen a lot?
Yeah, it does happen, and it happens sometimes. Sometimes we put people on the show, and I have no idea they had a connection beforehand, but they did. I just didn't know about it. But it's obvious when you hear them together. It's like I'm not surprised that they toured together before, and sometimes they play on the last song, and we've had people. To get people to open for them. We had Squirrel Nut Zippers. You remember that group? Squirrel Nut Zippers were there, and the Dirty Dozen were on. And really and truly, Squirrel Nut Zippers and Jimbo Mathis knew. I mean, he knew what the deal was. They were imitating kind of old jazz bands. They weren't really all that good, but they were fun, and people liked them. Dirty Dozen was the real deal, and so they were on the same show. So they asked the Dirty Dozen to go on the road with them and open for them, which was fun. They met on the show. There's been solid people that have met on the show and collaborated. And, individuals that have collaborated that ended up doing some work later. That's fun. But we like to get them when we can. And then sometimes they'll even ask them, like a great player like Jerry Douglas, if he's on the show, some other people who are Americana people will see he's a dobro player if you don't know. And they'll listen to him and say, could you play on my set? And he's a nice guy. I said, sure, of course. Tim O'Brien, Jerry Douglas, sure, yeah, I'll play mandolin on your set. And they're going, oh my God, Tim O'Brien's playing on our set, which is great. And that's fun. I mean, it's like going to a festival somewhere and people just hanging around playing. That's what you hope to get, because nobody else has that. Nobody else has that recording except us. So you hope they'll do a little of that. I mean, I can't make them, but if they do, we say, oh, sure, Tim's a nice guy. Tim, well, these guys want you to play on their record, and on their set, and oh sure, he goes and plays. You kind of know, especially if you know the artist. So we've had some of that where they actually collaborated and recorded later, but a lot of it's just they never do it again. They just do it on the show, and that's fun.
Hey, was there a time Nancy Griffith was on the show, and And you also scheduled an ex-husband.
Yeah, I did. We've done that. Well, we've done that with Roseanne Cash and Rodney Crowell too. And I asked them because they were married, and I said, we had Roseanne already scheduled, and Rodney wanted to do it. We said, "Do you guys care?" And they said, "Oh no, we're still friends." But she did it with Eric. What's his name? Her ex-husband Nancy. They've been married for a while. Eric Taylor. Eric Taylor. Yeah. They
And
were funny. They had a little bit. Yeah, they sang together. They hadn't done anything together in 20 years since they were divorced. But
Right.
they did. It's fun. I mean,
She wound up with tears in her eyes.
yes, she did. You never know. We're looking for real stuff, real emotion and real collaboration in something that people want to do. Sometimes it works, Sometimes it doesn't.
I know international artists have been a big part of Mountain Stage. How do you approach that?
We get people when we can get them because we can't bring anybody from Africa or South America or Europe, but when they're here, or Ireland, England, Scotland, but we look for them here. And there's 3 or 4 agents that do that, and they know that we're one of the places that they can look to that will put acts on the show, which gives them exposure in the States. And sometimes it just gives them a place to fill in. It gives them an anchor to they know they're going to do this. They got a place to stay. They got a little bit of money here. Then they try to book around it. And we do that. We've had a lot of African bands, a lot of European groups, especially, of course, Irish and English and Scottish, and some South American, too. So it's tougher. It's been tougher since 2009 because coming over here is much more difficult. It costs more money. It's difficult.
Well, some of the students in the audience may not appreciate this, but I'm curious. What did Allen Ginsberg do on Mountain Stage? Allen Ginsberg was a guest in 1986.
He was guest twice, actually.
Twice?
Yeah, he was guest on the show twice. We used to have poets on the show. We had Gary Snyder on the show, too. We had several people that are well-known American poets. We quit doing that. I kind of like to go back to it, but the stations said that they wanted music only, basically, so we went to music. But I'd really like to start doing it again, especially great performing poets. Ginsberg, though, was a performer. He wasn't just a poet. He was great. He came on the show, and I'll tell you what he did that was interesting. He read a bunch of poems, maybe 5 or 6 poems. He picked them out because they were short, they were entertaining. And something I noticed later when I looked him up was that he had actually changed a few words. We didn't ask him to. We didn't say anything. We didn't say don't say shit, don't say fuck, anything like that. But he had changed a few words because he knew that it would be a problem for us. Now you think Allen Ginsberg, Mr. Bohemian, Mr. He did that on his own because we said you do whatever you want. You can trust people, if you really do, then they won't screw you most of the time. Sometimes they will, but that's why we don't do the show live anymore. But that he did some great stuff. And the second time he was on, he had just written this book called White Shroud, which was a long poem. And I asked him to read the long poem. He said, "You sure you want me to do that? It's a long poem, People may get bored." I said, No, it's a wonderful poem. So he read that. It's a great poem. He was a performer. He knew what to do. He played. We also got to play with him, play guitar and stuff, and he would sing. He would sing and play his harmonium and sing. And he was Allen Ginsberg. That was great. That's our little connection. In many ways, I think Mountain Stage is more connected to the beat generation than it is even to the hippie generation. Even though we're old, it's just like the spirit goes farther back. I think we may have David Amram on the show this year, which is a guy that wrote the music for the famous Robert Frank film we were talking about earlier with Brian, who's up there. Pull My Daisy, the beat generation film that Jack Kerouac narrated. He's 82 something. Amram's still playing music. That's another thing. We like to mix. I'd like to have a guy that's 80 or a woman that's 80 on the show, and then somebody that's 20. I think that's great. That's just interesting. That's real life. That's what you have. Hopefully, if your grandmother's alive, God bless you. You could be 20, she could be 80, and you're lucky that you know her. So that's what I like to have. That's because none of us invent this stuff. It's all some version of something that's come before, and we like to point that out as much as we can.
Yeah, I noticed in the book that Michael did, the 20th anniversary, that was a point that was made that was really strong, that the whole idea of the pioneers, the people who laid the foundation for the people who are performing now and the traditions, and you seem to honor that.
Do I see what?
You seem to honor that. The show seems to honor that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's a constant thread throughout the whole thing. And I think that, some of the people who were the pioneers when they were first on the show, you might not have called them pioneers, but 20, 30 years later, they certainly were. And then I think Larry also makes a point sometimes to, like with the Squirrel Nut Zippers and the Dirty Dozen Brass Band, to include the later version and the original version, and they bookend the show sometimes, and it gives people, you may only be familiar with the newer version, and I guess it's kind of like listening to music in general. You hope that if you listen to something you like, you'll go a step further and you'll say, I wonder where these guys got this from. And then sometimes on the show, you can see it all in one day. You can see the evolution and where it came from.
Francis, give us one of your most difficult experiences, an artist that you had to work with, and what happened?
Sometimes they think they can hear better than I can, and I know that for the four of us sitting here on the stage, we can't hear nearly as well as you guys sitting out there, and we faced that. We had a fellow at Tamarack who wanted to mix himself, and I can remember who it was. I can't remember. It was two people, I think. But anyhow, that was rough. But then we have road managers who come in and we ask them to be just be producer for the day, and tell me what this band should sound like, and tell me if anybody's going to be singing backup, stuff like that, and they'll say, well, we'll just mix it ourselves. And that's what we really need to be doing here. But what they don't understand is that there are, four other acts on the show, and it's not just about them. There's got to be like a continuity from beginning to end for the listener at home. And so sometimes, thank goodness I have Michael, because I missed the tact gene. So...
We just had an experience last weekend.
Francis sometimes basically says, get lost.
So what are your most difficult problems on dealing with people?
Well, every now and then we have people who, like Francis said, they think that they're the center of the universe, and that they forget we have four other acts on this show. And you have to remind them of that. And we've never, thus far, a few people have act like, well, if I don't get this, I can't perform. And we said, great, get back on the bus. We got four other acts. They didn't get back on the bus because they want to do the show. I mean, that's what they're here for. And that very, very seldom happens, though. Very, very seldom happens. I told you earlier, it's a very famous guy that was on the show, and he's the only person we've ever told, here's your check. Get the hell out of here. And he said, no, I'll do the show. And probably a lot of you know who he is. He's a great songwriter. Warren Zevon. He's a tough guy. He's known to be a difficult guy on purpose. And he was on the show twice. The second time we were in Boston. See, another thing is, like I said before, if you're in a big city, it's a different deal. In West Virginia, he was no problem. In Boston, he was a big problem. And he was acting like this. Our PA and our monitor system was no good. It was no good. It's horrible. I'm not going to play under this crap. And you know who else was on the show? Nils Lofgren. You know who he is? He's a guitar player that played with Bruce Springsteen, Neil Young, and everything. He just gotten off a 40-city tour with Neil Young. We went to he's a great guy, nice guy. So Niels, is this sound system any good? He goes, yeah, it's great, it's fine. I said, okay, just checking. Went back to Zevon, and Andy said, yeah, if you don't like this, great, here's your check. We'll do the show without you. Called his bluff, basically. And he said, no, I'll play. We said, okay. But that seldom happens. We don't get big stars like that are, he had a problem, in my opinion. He's dead now, so I'm talking about a dead man, which isn't fair. But, he can't say you're full of crap to me. But if I were to analyze my amateur psychoanalysis, he had this problem that I describe, and some people have it, which is I should be more famous than I am problem. And you know what? He's right. He should have been a lot more famous than he was because he was much more talented than a lot of crap that sold a lot of records. He is correct, but that ain't the way the world works. So what can I say? You know, I'm a little nobody doing a show in West Virginia. He's much more well-known than me, and he should be. He's more talented. But still, that's the way the world is. I can't fix that for you. That's the way it is.
Michael, good experience, bad experience. Give me a couple.
Well, by and large, you know, they're great experiences, kind of on both ends. You know, playing with some of the artists. There's been very few bad experiences with that, and it really teaches you. You have to be. Well, I guess it's just like on the other side of the board. You have to. You know, you've got one chance to do it, and you know you have to try and do it right. One of the first shows I played on, I think it was Tracy Nelson, and she's a blues singer, and there was a song with guitar solos in it, and I completely got screwed up, and I went home and I just said, okay, that's it, I quit, forget it, I can't do this anymore. And then I realized, well, next week there was another show, and life goes on. And it was really, and it's definitely different than if you're playing just a live show and screw up, you know, because it's there on tape. But on the other hand, it definitely shows you, well, you know, life goes on, and you can live another week, play another week. And that was kind of a freeing experience, really, because, okay, it took some of the pressure off.
Yeah, once you screwed up, you know, and we've screwed up so many times that now it's like, well, you know, guess what? And we'd said that to many people, too, and this is something about anything, I guess. I was on some shows, some TV shows and radio shows where they acted like, if you screw up, boy, this is it. You've ruined everything. The world's coming to an end. That's not, are you kidding me? Our attitude is, hey, this is an arts entertainment show. We're not in an operating room. We're not on a battlefield. You screw up, guess what? Everything's still fine. You can do it again, or do it over, or don't do it over. We'll all be fine. It's okay. And that's the fact. I mean, don't be idiotic about this. We've had so many great experiences, so many incredibly good experiences. I mean, and Michael, I remember when he first started the show way back, what was this, 88 or 9, when Dr. John came on. Dr. John wanted to play with our band. You know who Dr. John is? He came on solo. I want to play with your band, you know. So our bass player, drummer, and Michael, they play with Dr. John. Are they scared? Yeah, no joke. But they were great. They really were great. And listen to it now. You can listen back. I love to listen to these tapes. Just like, man, believe me, they were paying attention. They were on the edge of their seats doing this stuff. So it's great. But we've had such a good, I mean, I was thinking about that when you said that. Singing This Land Is Your Land with Arlo Guthrie. I mean, there's so many things that we've done that I'll never forget. That's things that have happened.
Well, kind of that was one of those final song things. And for those of you who know the show, there's a final song that usually doesn't make it on the radio. But if you're there in person, it's usually pretty incredible. A good number of the folks from the acts perform on that. And I was, again, from Michael's book. The first one happened on January 28th, 1990. And imagine this, Taj Mahal, Robin and Linda Williams, and Livingston Taylor doing a reggae version of You Are My Sunshine. I mean, that had to be utterly crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It was interesting. And we try to get a different song we've done some of them twice, but that means since 1990 we've done 815 shows or 16 shows, and we've probably done almost 700 finale songs. And we've done some of them twice, but we've done a lot of different ones. And there's been some. I think we did Season of the Witch with Donovan. Very seldom do we do songs written by any of the artists, but every now and then, you got Donovan on the show. I mean, you gotta do that. We had Chip Taylor. You know who Chip Taylor is? with Chip Taylor, he wrote a song called Wild Thing. We did Wild Thing for the. I said, "Can we do that, Chip?" Sure, why not? So we did Wild Thing. Every now and then we get some. We did Randy Newman. We did one of his songs. There's a few people. Ian Tyson was on. We did Four Strong Winds. There's some songs that you hate to let them go, since they wrote. Oh, we had Alan Toussaint was on. We did Working in a Coal Mine. It was great. If you think that I'm singing with Ralph Stanley. I'm singing Angel Band with Ralph Stanley. Can pinch yourself, That's Ralph Stanley. So that's cool. I mean, there's a lot of things. And we do that for fun. We do it to end the show. We usually fade after the first few seconds or minute or so. We leave it online sometimes, the whole finale song. So, it's rough. Sometimes it's almost impossible to mix. I mean, all these people out there, Francis, trying to find where we tell him, but it's difficult. But we does a great job. And sometimes they're really funny. Sometimes they don't work so good. Sometimes they work really good. And we've had some some interesting. Could go down on it. It's hard to do it without having the script in front of you to look at all the ones we've done. But we've had some great ones, some interesting.
Yeah, I mean, always an interesting moment on the show. We're going to take some questions if anyone has any questions. But this is being recorded, so if you would just step up to one of there's a mic up there. There's two down here, and if anyone has something to ask, go for it.
Hello. I have a few questions. It's a multi-question here. One, we were talking about the process of bands and performers submitting their music to you. How many ears listen to it? And do you listen to every single thing that is submitted? And do you just listen to the first 15 seconds and make up your mind that way? What's the process?
I'll start with the last thing.
Okay.
We only listen to a little bit of a song. If you send me something, at this point, 30 seconds of one song, I can tell pretty much whether I like it or not, or whether I think. And if I have any interest in it, I'll listen to another song. Usually I'll listen to a bit of 3 songs. If the first one is horrible, then that's the end of that. And if you're a person submitting something, if your first song isn't your best song, you're crazy. You're crazy. What do you want? What, somebody's going to go down and listen to the 5th song? Think about that. That's the way it is. So, but if you like the first song, I may listen to some other things. That's the first thing. Number 2, do I listen to everything? No, we do not listen to everything. Some things, I'm telling you, I'm sad to tell you, I can look at the CD and say, that ain't going to work. That's the way it is, folks. You can hate me for that. The third one, I'm not the only one that listens to it, but I make the final decision. But sometimes I ask other people. There's people in our office and other people, and I say, let's listen to this. I think this, I don't know about this. You listen to it. They go, oh, I really like this. Okay, that makes me. Plus, some of them sometimes they're 28 years old. I'm 66 years old. Makes a difference. So there's not more. There's not just me, but I make the final decision of who goes on and who doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. I heard my first show of yours in Montana driving along, and it was the REM show. And I was wondering if you can tell me anything about shows that might be happening in the future that not are yours, but shows that are younger shows that might be happening that can keep going on.
You mean other radio shows?
Other radio shows.
I don't know too much. It's tough to do these kind of shows. There's local shows. There's a lot of local shows people do around the country, but national shows, there aren't very many.
I was asking about NPR shows that might be for younger people that are going to keep going.
That's what I'm saying. There aren't that many shows like this. There may be shows that are aimed at younger people, but there aren't very many live music shows. They do some recording. NPR does some recording like at South by Southwest or something, but it's not a show. It's like they record somebody doing it South by Southwest, put it on the air. Some of those bands we have on Mountain Stage too, but then some are aimed at, they do. The World Cafe is aimed much more. If you want to show, if you're going to listen to a show that somebody's trying to do only the hippest, latest thing, we do some of that, but we don't do all of that. That's not what all we do. World Cafes tries a little bit more. They leave out a lot of stuff and go for the hipster stuff, the most edgy stuff. And sometimes it works, and like anything, some works, some doesn't. But it may be aimed at a younger audience. I know this. I think we have a younger audience listening than they have, which is odd. Did I say that already? 40? 40. Well, Mountain Stage, public radio is an old listenership audience. Most of you people, how many people here actually listen to public radio at all? Oh, good. By and large, most people listen to public radio. The average listeners, I think, is 54. I think. Mountain Stage, 40% of Mountain Stage listeners are under 44 years old. That's young for public radio. We have one of the youngest audiences of anything. So I don't know. There are other shows like us. There are 2 or 3 other shows like us, but they don't aim at a particularly young audience. They're more similar to us. They have a wider range. But they do, NPR itself does record sometimes at certain places and then put it on the air, but it's not a regular show like this. So I don't know. There may be some out there local, but there aren't any at the moment national. It's not too easy to do a show like this. But somebody here could start one, name it at People 22, but you might have a hard time getting public radio because that's not their listenership. People 22 are not their listeners, generally speaking.
As an artist myself, I mean, it's interesting observing you all who've been doing this for like so long. I mean, just listening to music and I wonder. I wanted to know what drives, especially. I mean, you do radio for an audience that has grown, like, over the years, and like whose musical tastes have, like as you stated, like changed. So like, what drives your knack to keep doing it? Is it the appreciation for the music, like music that you all like you personally like, or is it just putting something new on people's minds or something?
I'm a broadcast engineer, and this is the nature of my business. I knew what I wanted to do when I was perhaps 11 or 12 years old, and managed to become an engineer, I guess, sort of through my own wits. And my parents, I love them to death, but they just weren't able to help. And they didn't know. It was just foreign to anything that they could understand, and so I would seek the advice of different people, and then I'm a very lucky guy. So I managed to get the training that I needed, got the first job, and which was the greatest job, in New York City, and stayed there until I learned it, and met Larry, Michael. These guys know so much about music, and I don't at all. And but that's where they come in.
I think there's a couple things that probably keeps everything going. Not the show necessarily, but everybody's own drive, and I think it does start with a love of music, in a broad appreciation of music, and the process, the people who make it, and I think I don't know, can't speak for everybody, but as we've gotten older, I think it's a business that keeps you young too. We were talking earlier, you don't feel much different than we did when the show started, and I think a lot of it has to do with what we do, the people we work with, and there's an energy there.
But the reason I think that I still do the show is because it never fails. I hear something that's great, and it could be somebody 21, and I listen to, damn, that's good. How do they do that? They're 21 years old. How do they know that? How the hell do they know how to write a song like that? It's not that they're 20. It could be they're 51. I don't care, but it's like, wow. It's still, there are factors there. And we're jaded, of course. We've been around a while, heard a lot of stuff. And that's why I say I can look at a CD sometimes, a cover, say that ain't going to be it. I can listen to the first 20 seconds. But then now and then you listen to the first 20 seconds, you say, wait a minute. What's this? Damn, that person's good. Believe me, you've never heard it all. You never heard all the good stuff. There's so much, of course, out there that you never even hear, but it still gets you. There's on every show There's never fails. There's 5 acts. At least once or twice on the show, I'm listening going, damn, it gives me chills. This is great. And I want to tell everybody, listen to this. That's great. Listen to that right there. That's great. They can believe me or not, but I believe it. And that's why I want to still do it. You know, and she's right. I mean, and it means I can work with you. I can work with your dad, your mom, your aunt, or whatever. You know, it doesn't make a difference how old we are. That's a real leveling thing. You like music, you're into it. If you got an ear, I want to hear what you say. I mean, that's part of the deal. I mean, you know, that's why I said we got some. The rest of the people, we're older, but the executive producer Mountain Stage is 32, and the other people in the office are like 29, 31, 36, and that's the way it ought to be. I wish we had ones that were 19, just so we get a different point of view.
I guess you know this is rather a progressive community. We had people arrested protesting at an injection well. So when I hear you thanking Chesapeake Energy, and I saw something, I think on Facebook or something today, tell NPR to get out of the dirty energy business. Maybe you don't have a choice. You have to take your dollars where you can, but it's just upsetting that there are sponsors like that out there. Think about it. Think about how great it is ruining your water and your air, you know, for energy. So I wonder what you think about that.
What I think is that Chesapeake Energy endorses Mountain Stage. We don't endorse Chesapeake Energy. And we take money from people who endorse our music and don't tell us what to play, don't influence the show in any way, and never have. And as long as it's legal, I'll consider taking money, and it's not me, it's the show itself, from any organization. We take money from the U.S. government, and they fight wars in Afghanistan, which I'm not crazy about either. There's a lot of things that go on that aren't my favorite things, but as I said, they endorse us, we don't endorse them. And if they do bad things, I suggest you go after Chesapeake Energy and try to stop them from doing the bad things.
Anyone else? Yeah.
This is coming from another sound man's point of view. What is your type of, or your favorite type of music to mix? I know some people come in, you say you kind of go with the flow. What was your, like, you know, you really like mixing this type of music it's a lot easier or a lot more fun than other types?
Well, you know, I suppose it's the music where I don't have to work so hard, and I can just sort of sit there and listen to it. and actually, the first time that I really noticed that happening was when Dr. John was on and sang his song "Such a Night." And I just didn't have to do too much at all, and I was just grooving and loving being there. But at the same time, there are other groups. I'd love to know what the heck the deal is. I think people can't always hear themselves so clearly. They're sitting as a group on a stage, and I have to sit there and just nudge here and there and a little of this and a little of that, and it sounds very good, but requires a lot of effort.
You have a style that you prefer?
A style?
A style of music?
No. No.
You mix what comes, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Oh, Michael,
Good music.
By the way, it's another answer to you. Mountain Stage, on purpose, has had a policy forever, which is, I'll sum it up this way. You can sing all the hymns you want, but you can't preach a sermon. That has to do with politics, has to do with religion. Come on, sing everything you want. But as soon as you start telling us the way that we should convert to this or that politics or this or that religion, that's out of the show. It's just our policy. There are other shows that have an agenda, and they're preaching to you an agenda. Great. You like that? You want that? Go listen to them.
Yes.
Do you guys ever like move into the digital world? Do you guys ever use like Logic Pro and like Pro Tools and stuff? I know you guys probably know like analog pretty well, but have you ever transferred into that? What's your opinions on that?
Yeah, well, you're looking at a technologist, and we're just always going after the latest thing that we can get. We're completely digitized at this point, and Cat5 cable, no snakes anymore, just Cat5 cable running everywhere. It's great technology. As a matter of fact, we needed a snake, and we could see the ends, fraying on this one cable, and I knew I had to do something about it. And so I remember telling my people, I said, I don't want to do anything about this until we can, make the digital conversion. Then the time came, and some of the younger guys, not too much older than yourself, said, we can't do it. It's not ready, not time yet. And we had the most difficult time, convincing these people, and who I thought, I'm nearly 72 years old, and, it's like I should be the guy they're pulling along, but I felt sort of weird because it was me pulling them along. And digital, doing anything digital means that there's going to be delay. It's not instantaneous. Anytime there's a conversion, time passes. And so this one fellow was a musician, and he said, it won't work. It's not going to work because, he said, like a drummer, it's going to hit that snare drum, and then later in time he'll hear it crack. and so I was telling another fellow who works with me, he's a lot brighter than I am. He said, if that guy could put his forehead against the wall and make a sound and hear the delay from the time sound emanates from his mouth and back to his ears again. He said he might have a case, but no, we've made the conversion. And
how many years ago did we go total digital? 5 years?
Yeah, it was like 5 years.
It's all digital for Francis was doing computers long before you were born. I mean, he's been into the latest thing for a long time. But we have recorded on every. By the way, we have recorded on every medium since the beginning. We did in the beginning because there wasn't digital. We recorded on reel-to-reel tape. We recorded on DAT tape. We recorded on mini disc. We recorded on CDs, and we recorded
Neil
on hard
Young
drive.
does analog anyway, so I mean, you know what.
But also simple microphones. That's all you need. And we don't get too fancy about that at all. As a matter of fact, we just had a group who brought their own stuff in, and Neumann's or something or other, and I don't know if they were in not good working shape or the guy just didn't know how to. It was cray. Use them, but you'll hear it because when he recorded his promotional announcement, just like all garbled. So I like tried and true and recent stuff. I'm not a vinyl kind of guy either. If that's what you're thinking, I don't know.
Anybody else?
We are a progressive community, and I'm wondering if you got the chance to sample some of the local food movement. Are you Mr. Natural, or are you a junk food junkie these days?
Well, no, I like it here. I like eating here. We ate. Where we eat tonight? Casa tonight, and no, it's great. It's a great, good thing. It's a great place. This is a great city and a great university here. To me, it seems very much so. I always like it here, and also people here know music very well. Very sophisticated music people. They know a lot about music. That's the kind of audience I like the best. that know a lot about music, because hopefully they'll understand what we're trying to do. Because we try to do some things that sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But in terms of making these connections and put things together. But yeah, sure, the food's great here. Yeah.
I heard you mention earlier that like the only way you could like actually see the show is to go to the show. I was wondering if you guys ever actually use video and broadcast it, or if you've ever considered it, whether it's television or online.
Yeah, we have. We've done. But matter of fact, the last show we did was webcast. We're starting to webcast some shows, but we in the past we had the show on. It was on public television in 2001, 2, and 3. We did 3 seasons of that, but we don't have the money to do that. That's the trouble. Production costs so much, and plus nowadays even worse than then. And that's only been 12 years ago. Where are you going to put it on regular television? I mean, nobody does that. And Austin City Limits is still hanging on. But what is there that's live performance shows? There's the channel that has those things, We could do that. But we may go into a lot more low cost, low tech webcast so that we can do that. And we've been doing that. We've done that about a half a dozen times in the last 8 months. We did it with our 30th anniversary show in December. We did it on this last show that we just did with Robert Cray. So yeah, we're with GoPros and a few live camera people, but it costs so much money to do video, so much more money, that it's just difficult. But we're going to try to do webcasts because it's also good to have. We have a pretty big presence on online with Tumblr and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. So it's useful to have video sometimes for that to later on. So we do. The answer is hopefully on webcast we'll be doing more of that so that you can actually go and see it live without it being the finished show. You're watching the show as if you were in the auditorium, which is fine. I mean, that's sometimes there's gaps and we sit around and just like if you're there, you see the same thing. And then you hear on the radio, it's all edited. But yeah, that's a good point. And we're going to try to do more on webcast. Thank you.
By the way, the video production work comes from West Virginia Public Television people, and I've kind of insisted that they use my audio, just a direct digital feed, into the encoders and stuff. So, should be fairly good.
He said modestly.
Yeah, right.
He says
fairly
modestly.
good. Fairly good.
It's true. No, it's difficult for them to get a good mix, but Francis already has a good mix. So,
Anybody else? Okay, thank you for coming.
thanks very much.